Hello everyone, welcome to another video. In this video, we will discuss an important concept in our JavaScript or jQuery called as promise. Most of the times, we write JavaScripts which are asynchronous in nature, and we also write synchronous JavaScripts. So, what is synchronous and asynchronous? Let us understand first. Whenever you write a JavaScript and you call a function, you can see my screen. When you call a JavaScript function, let's say you want to execute three actions: action 1, action 2, and action 3. Let's say action 1 takes 20 seconds, action 2 takes 30 seconds, action 3 takes 10 seconds. So in synchronous programming, what happens when a JavaScript gets called? Action 1 is initiated, and once it is completed after 20 seconds, it go to next stage, action 2. Then action 2 starts. Once it is completed in 30 seconds, action 3 executes. So we execute, the function gets executed sequentially. After one action completes, it go to second action, and this in this time the screen gets freezed because this is synchronous programming. In synchronous programming, the actions gets executed sequentially, which freeze the screen or hold the execution on the screen in the browser. What about the actions which are very time consuming? For example, web API calls. Sometimes it takes more than 20 seconds or 30 seconds. In that scenarios, we don't need to make the screen freeze. We can initiate that action which is time consuming as asynchronous, let other steps execute without holding the screen freeze. That is called as asynchronous programming. So actions can get executed in background asynchronously in a different thread. So if you make this action as asynchronous, what will happen? If you make this action asynchronous, when the function is called, the action once it started, once it will execute for 20 seconds, it will initiate the action 2, and once the execution of action 1 starts, it immediately jump to the action 3. It will not wait till the action 2 gets completed. Because it is synchronous, a different thread will open for this for execution. Maybe it takes 30 seconds, 1 minute, whatever, does not matter, but the execution thread will immediately jump to the action 3 without waiting action 2 to complete. That is the nature of asynchronous programming. So if your action is time consuming, make this asynchronous and let the JavaScript function execute the next line of code without making the screen freeze or hold. Does not matter when this action 2 will be completed, because I want to run this on background asynchronously. When the result is ready, it will print or whatever logic you have written in the action 2, it will perform. But it will run in asynchronously without blocking the line of execution or code, next line of code, right? But sometimes, although you make this action asynchronous, maybe action 3 is dependent on this action 2, that to understand what is the status of the asynchronous process. Let's say this action 2 takes 1 minute, and action 3 has some dependency on the status, execution status of the action 2, although it is asynchronous. Then, although you make this execution of action 2 asynchronous, you have an option to hold this action 2 execution status using a promise. So you can implement a promise here, or action 2 gets executed with a promise that it will complete and return its status to the action 3, so that action 3 will use some information from action 2. So promise is used to make a asynchronous programming or asynchronous thread to keep wait to get its status. Okay. So in JavaScript, promise is actually used to break the asynchronous behavior to be synchronously behaved. Okay. And also we can say that in general term, okay, a promise is an object that presents or that represents the eventual completion of failure of an asynchronous operation, whether this operation action 2 is failed or success. That status can be returned as a promise, because you never know in action 3 that whether action 2 is completed or not, because it is asynchronous running in background, you have no control. But you can introduce a promise to hold the status of the asynchronous operation and pass the value to the next step. In when you use a promise, you can use three stages: pending, fulfilled, or rejected, or resolve. Okay, you can take a real world use case. Okay, let's say you are going to a restaurant and you are ordering a food, right? You place an order, right? First you place an order, and you place an order, then you receive a promise that it will be delivered to you. So placing order is here the asynchronous. You placed the order, and preparation of food is asynchronous in background. Once the preparation is ready, they will deliver you, right? So this is how it works, right? Let's say action 1 is placing order, and let's say placing order takes 20 minutes, 20 seconds. Now once you placed the order, food preparation is in process, so this takes time. It is not immediate. Once you place order, you do not get the food, right? So because it is asynchronous, your your food preparation team will give you a promise. Although they are preparing the food in background, they will give a promise that it is prepared. Once it is prepared, you pick up that and go to home, right? So collect the food. This is how it works, right? So food preparation is in background. So promise, why promise is required? Promise is required because you should have a status. What about your food preparation? Is it completed or not? Otherwise, how can you understand food preparation is done and you collect the food? You cannot collect the food. So to collect the food, food preparation must be completed. So the status must be available in a promise. So promise in JavaScript is used to get a status of your asynchronous process operation. That is the simple concept. Okay. Now let us try and implement some example here. I am having a HTML page here. Okay. In this HTML page, I have taken a function whose function name is start. I have four functions: hello, which returns a string hello; another function how, which returns a string how; another function are, which returns a string called as r; another function called as u, which returns a string u; and another function is name, which returns Sanjay. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 functions, and these 5 functions are called on a single function called as start. I'm storing this in a variable var hello, var how, are, you, name. So I'm calling all the functions and storing in a variable and printing in a string. Very simple, right? And calling this function in a button click on start. And here I am logging the strings in a console log. Now let us save it and refresh this. So this is the page that I am using or testing. Now in this page, this is the button. If you click this button, you will see it is printing immediately. Hello, how are you, Sanjay? Right? This is what it is expected because it is called synchronously. First, hello is called and it returns hello, stores in this variable like how are you, name, and printing here, right? But if I want to return name after 2 seconds, in the name function, I will go to the name function, and instead of returning Sanjay immediately, what I want to do, I want to implement a set timeout function. I want to return this after 2 seconds. 2000 means 2000 millisecond means 2 seconds. Now I converted just the name function to run in background, because set timeout is a background operation, right? It is waiting for 2 minutes, 2 seconds, and or waiting for a duration and do some execution. Now what if you run this? Let us save this and run this. Now if you click this, you will get hello, how are you, undefined. Why it is telling undefined? Because this function name will it's called immediately when this line of code reaches. But because it is asynchronous in nature by default, the line of execution didn't wait here. It printed directly this one, because this name function is now running in a different thread. So by the time it reaches to this line of code, name function didn't return any value, because it's still waiting for 2 seconds. That's why it is storing how are you undefined, because the name function is still not executed in time. That means it is running asynchronously. Because it is running asynchronously, you cannot get its response or return value immediately. So what you can do in this case, you have to make the use of promise. How to use promise? First, you have to make this function asynchronous, the entire function asynchronous, and make this function await. Using asynchronous and await, you can tell the code or JavaScript to wait or hold the line of code to get the response to navigating to the next line of code. So if this name function will not be completed with its promise, don't go to next stage, next step. It only works in asynchronous method. Okay. Now let me go here and add promise. First, you have to make it is asynchronous and add await, that is asynchronously behaving, and go to that function. And here you need to return a promise. So return new promise, and inside that you need to pass a resolve or reject object. Then inside that you need to pass the asynchronous code. This is your asynchronous code. And here instead of return, you just use this resolve and this message. Resolve in bracket, you need to pass whatever value you want to pass. Now this promise object, which is a resolve, will now return a message or return a promise object with this information to your function you declared as await. So by the time the execution reaches here, it will hold here for a moment to wait for the response or or promise to be once it is resolved or name function is executed, then pass the name value to this function, this line of code. So promise is actually used to hold asynchronous process behavior to get its promise or its execution status. Now let us test this. If you make this 3000 also, that means 3 seconds also, it will work as it is. Now click. Once you click, you still, you see it is waiting. It is waiting completely 3 seconds. But what if I want to log this information like this? First I want to console log hello here. Okay, here I want to use hello. Next, here I want to use how, just printing after each function call. And here I am printing r, and here I am printing u, then the name. Now if you refresh and click, you see hello how are you is printed immediately, but after 3 seconds it is printing the entire one because the last line is waiting till the name function, which is asynchronous function promise, is resolved. Okay, that's how the promise is used in our asynchronous programming. I hope you understand how it works. Thank you everyone watching this video. See you next time. Bye.